Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Monday. Welcome to Let's Talk Tropics. It was a fairly quiet weekend, although we had what was left of a couple of tropical storms, Jerry and Karen, both of those dissipating over the weekend. But then this morning we ended up with Tropical Storm Lorenzo, which is our newest contestant. It's actually our 12th named storm of the hurricane season, and a normal season usually brings about 14. So we've got about 6 weeks to go. Usually October brings about 2 or 3 named storms. In November, we usually get about 1 to 2. So we'll talk about Lorenzo, but that's really the only game we've got out there right now. A beautiful day across the Acadiana region. Temperatures started out nice and cool this morning, and it looks like we're going to see plenty of sunshine out there. And the rest of the Gulf Coast, gorgeous weather over in Orange Beach this morning, and then also over toward Dauphin Island, Alabama. Looking off toward the west, Cocodrie looking good with mostly sunny skies and a lot of sunshine out there for Galveston as well. And I keep saying this morning, again, this is a pre-recorded version as I'm working over in Baton Rouge today. We have a noon show, so kind of knocking this out a little bit early. But all the information that we have with Tropical Storm Lorenzo is the latest. That came down at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. Next advisory doesn't come down until about 4 o'clock later this afternoon. As far as boating, things actually looking pretty good here along the Gulf Coast here locally. We've got light winds that are going to be out of the east or east-northeast today, about 5 to 10 knots, and seas running about 1 to 2 feet. And all of our rain is associated with a frontal boundary back here to the northwest. Some Pacific moisture coming across the middle part of the country ahead of a trough that will dig off toward the east, and eventually I do believe we'll see a better chance for rain here locally as we head toward the latter part of the week, but more likely as we get into the weekend. But really, I think most of the action is going to pass north of us and shouldn't be much of a problem over the course of the weekend. Got a pretty intense low pressure area, though, that's along the east coast, and that's going to continue to kind of ride off toward the northeast and then really start to intensify out here in the Atlantic Ocean. It's not going to become anything tropical. It's going to be what we call more of a nor'easter, and it's going to be helped out by an upper trough that's currently moving across the Great Lakes, and that frontal boundary should work its way southward into our region as we head into the latter part of the weekend, bringing us at least a chance for a shower and a deep trough out here in the west. That's going to help to really ramp things up over the Atlantic coming up farther down the road. As far as the Gulf waters, we're in great shape there. Just a fair sky kind of a day. No tropical waves out there, no heavy downpours on any coastlines. So we're going to see some great weather there over the Gulf waters. Kind of what's left of an old tropical wave is still kind of working its way westward over toward Nicaragua and Honduras this morning. And the rest of the Caribbean is relatively quiet. This is kind of part of an old frontal boundary here. We might see another low develop and then kind of scoot its way off toward the northeast. But at this point, the Gulf waters seem to be pretty much closed. This is what's left of Jerry from last week, the last advisory coming down from the National Hurricane Center on Saturday. So don't have to worry about that. So the only game we got in town right now is Tropical Storm Lorenzo. This one kicked up this morning. It was from Disturbance 97L that was being watched over the course of the weekend, but it officially got the name at 4 o'clock this morning, and the latest advisory came down at 10 with a little bit of increase in its wind speed. So the coordinates and the wind speeds you're seeing there on the left-hand side of your screen are the current conditions. And we've got that low, again, right off the east coast. That's going to be more of a nor'easter. Lorenzo is out in the central part of the Atlantic. And then we've got another tropical wave that's kind of coming off the African coast. At this point, models really don't seem to be picking up on that one. So we'll just kind of concentrate on Lorenzo, which is out there this morning. You can see on the visible satellite map, it is getting a lot better organized. In fact, I think Lorenzo looks better than what Jerry looked like for almost its entire life. Jerry, of course, getting sheared apart. But Lorenzo still a little bit heavy on the right side of the circulation, but we are seeing a little bit more thunderstorm activity developing around the center. So it is showing some signs signs of organization, but it is going to have kind of a hard time out in the middle part of the Atlantic. There's a lot of wind shear. It is expected to kind of turn off toward the northeast as the westerlies are really starting to dig farther to the south now across the central part of the Atlantic. So with that high wind shear, we're not expecting a lot of strengthening. And our computer models on the forecast track are pretty much on top of each other. There's good agreement there that this is going to turn northward and then back to the northeast. Some of the newer models indicate more of a southward turn, trying to loop upon itself, which does happen from time to time when we come to tropical storms, especially out in the eastern part of the Atlantic. And as far as the intensity models, really nothing is calling for a hurricane out of this particular system. And as you saw with the official National Hurricane Center's forecast in cone, they also believe that this is going to stay below hurricane strength, which is good news. Unfortunately, it's not going to affect anyone. So there are no watches and warnings that are up for Lorenzo. And because of that, we will get the updates every 6 hours. So the next drop will come at 4 o'clock later this afternoon. So again, Lorenzo, the only thing out there, and I don't think we're going to see anything else develop over the course of this week. But later in the week and next week, and again, the Global Tropics Hazard Outlook gets dropped on Tuesday. Usually after we do Let's Talk Tropics, so I've usually got the new version on Wednesday. But last week's version was still keeping things a little bit busy going into next week as the Central American gyre might get going once again. And sometimes you get systems that kind of wrap around that and work their way around. And occasionally you get something to develop in the southern Gulf or the western part of the Caribbean. But this time around, it looks like the Pacific side is going to be where more of the action is going to be. And then the following week, as we try to round out the month of October, also showing some signs of development there over the western part of the Caribbean, eastern Pacific, or the southern part of the Bay of Campeche. Not really seeing a lot of that in the models, but again, we'll get a new update from the Global Tropics Hazard Outlook for Week 2 and Week 3 coming up on Tuesday. There's a look at our water temperatures. Again, everything's still on the extreme side here across much of the Caribbean. Good news is we don't have any significant tropical waves that are moving across the Caribbean, nor am I really seeing anything in the computer models that's going anywhere close to this area. Of course, with the warm waters and the high tropical cyclone heat potential that's there, that's the deepness of those 80-degree waters. It can really tap into some of that fuel, and you can get a tropical depression or a weak tropical storm that can ramp up to a hurricane really, really quick. But fortunately, there is a lot of wind shear that's out there, and as I was saying, those upper-level westerlies are really coming off the North American continent and screaming their way off toward the east. So as Lorenzo tries to move northward, it's going to run into a lot of that wind shear. So that's why we're not expecting a whole lot of intensification with that particular tropical system. Also have a lot of wind shear down here in the southern and eastern part of the Gulf waters, and that extends out in the middle part of the Atlantic. Notice, though, the Caribbean, we've got a lot of light wind shear, so it is pretty fortunate that we're not looking at any tropical systems trying to work in that direction. So going through the models, and again, we don't have a whole lot to talk about with this one, so we'll start with the Euro model. And watch how Lorenzo just kind of pulls on toward the north. And in fact, the Euro model from this morning has it pretty much dissipating before it rounds a ridge of high pressure. And then over the Gulf waters, as we go out into that 10-day forecast, we're getting a decent number of cold fronts that are rolling across the North American continent. And then over the Gulf waters, it's sending a lot of dry air. So again, other than maybe in the Euro model going out just outside of the 10-day window, perhaps something trying to work over the southern part or the central part of the Caribbean, but most likely with that big trough that's out here across the middle part of the Atlantic, which is basically right about in this area, hopefully that would pick up anything down here and shove it off toward the northeast and not give us any problems. Let's roll it on back and see if we've got any continuity in between the different models there, and we'll go into the GFS. And again, you can see where you've got Lorenzo out in the Atlantic. And again, the GFS really isn't very impressed with Lorenzo either, kind of wrapping around that ridge of high pressure, rather, and then trying to make a little bit of a turn back toward the north, maybe looping around itself a couple times. But even going out into that 10-day period, again, going out, this would be on October the 23rd. So this is, about a week and a half from today, Thursday, the 23rd. The GFS, very similar to the Euro, is showing some tropical activity there over the Caribbean Sea. Again, there's another trough that's out here, kind of digging across the southeastern United States, which hopefully will pick this up and pull it back out to sea, and we won't have any problems associated with that. Next model we go to is the Canadian, and again, there you see Lorenzo really not looking very impressive. That next wave kind of comes off the African coast right here. This is that other wave that's right on the African coast right now. That one actually looks a little bit better according to the Canadian. And then it continues to work its way off toward the west, toward the northern part of the Caribbean. Now, is that going to be part of that other area that we saw that was on the GFS or the Euro model? Again, that's going to have to wait and see. This is a 10-day forecast. That's pretty far out there, and we know there's going to be a lot of changes between now and then. Let's go ahead and finish off with the icon. We can't use the moisture values with the icon, unfortunately, and the icon only goes out 7 days. And you can see 7 days out, it pretty much has Lorenzo fizzling over the northern part of the Atlantic, while the Gulf waters and the western Caribbean tend to stay pretty quiet here over the next 7 to 10 days. So good news there. AI model from Google also is showing Lorenzo kind of making a round off toward the north. I'll just go ahead and play that out. But the Google AI model really isn't very impressed with this system either, and it actually has it dissipate here over the next couple of days. So will we see any strengthening, or are we just going to see Lorenzo kind of loop around itself and not stay very strong? But at the very least, we're not very concerned about Lorenzo, as it is expected to stay out over the middle part of the Atlantic. But we've only got about 6 weeks left in the hurricane season, and usually we're able to relax a little bit more here along the northern Gulf Coast as we get to the end of October and especially into November. But we still got to kind of keep an eye on things, as we occasionally will get some development that's a little bit closer to home, especially there over the western part of the Caribbean or the southeastern Gulf. Now, during the latter part of October and especially in November, most of the time when you have stuff that develops here, it does tend to shoot its way back out into the Atlantic, and usually the Gulf Coast doesn't have to deal with that. But we have had some late-running tropical storms and hurricanes that affected the northern Gulf Coast all the way through the end of October. November, we've only had a couple of tropical storms come by, but we have not had a landfalling hurricane in Louisiana during the month of November. Of course, anything can happen, but really not seeing a whole lot here in the models coming up down the road. And there's a look at where we are right now. We're on the downside of the hurricane season, and by the time we finish off the month, we're pretty much down to the same levels that we would see during June and July, which really isn't a whole lot. It usually ramps up there August and September, and then by the end of October, things really start to calm down. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do like this video, subscribe to my channel and also turn on those notifications. And remember, you can hear my forecast daily on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. You can also catch me today at noon on WBRZ Channel 2. I've got a link below for our live stream, but many of you in the Acadiana area do catch Channel 2, and I'll be there again this upcoming weekend, both on Saturday and Sunday. And don't forget to follow my social media pages for any updates on Lorenzo, both on Facebook and X. And of course, thanks to everyone who's already subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday, and I'll see you Tuesday for Acadiana Weather Today back on the patio.